Good morning, Rabbi. Today we want to talk about two interesting and fascinating issues in Jewish law and halakha. One of them has to do with the laws of Shabbat, and this is something very practical because we're commanded by the sages that we should have some kind of hot food for each of the meals of Shabbat, each one of the three meals. So therefore, most people opt to use the utensil which is called plata. The plata is an electric hot plate which is especially made for the use on Shabbat, which keeps things hot. And what happens is that people keep the food on the plata until they want to use it for Shabbat. And this way they can have hot food on Shabbat, and have to have the oneg Shabbat to get the pleasure of eating hot food on Shabbat, which is something which is mandatory. It's an obligation to do this. So what happens is that now, let's say if I took off the food after I cooked it, I took it off the stove, I took it out of the oven, and I put it into the fridge. I want to guard it. I want to make sure it doesn't spoil, whatever it is. I don't want to get it burnt, too dry. So I put it into the fridge. Now in the morning I want to have it for my morning meal. So I take it out of the fridge and I want to heat it up and have a hot food for Shabbat. So the question is, can I do that? So the answer is depends on what you're doing and how you're doing. If you have something which is a dry dish, like rice and schnitzel, or some kind of meat dish which is dry, there's no broth there. So there it is allowed to take it out of the fridge and put it back on the plata if it's already fully cooked. If it's 100% fully cooked, so what happens is that now I can put it back on the plata and heat it up. What's the reason for that? The reason is because there's no issue of cooking anymore. Even though it'll get softer or let's say mushier or it may get drier or crispy, whatever, all kinds of things like this. Nevertheless, once it's cooked already, and bishul achar bishul, there is no cooking after cooking. Once it was cooked, there's no cooking after that. So therefore, I can put it back onto the plata, and there's no issue with cooking. There's another issue, which is that mixikim vashel. What does that mean? That it looks like you're cooking. People look at you and say, "Oh, this guy's cooking on Shabbat." So therefore, you have to also remedy that problem. So the way some people remedy this problem is by putting something in between the plata and the dish, some kind of a pot or a pan, to show that it's not you're not really cooking, because it's not the way to cook like that. To put something in the middle of the dish, let's say you have the dish like in one pot and then you put another pot on the bottom or a pan. It's not the way to cook like that, indirectly like that, from like going from the plata through an intermediary pot or a pan and then going into another pot of food. It's not the way to cook like that. So in order to show that we're not cooking, this is the way what some people do. The truth is, according to Maran, Moreno Rabbeinu, Rabbi Shalom, our great rabbi, he says that you don't need that. Why is that? Because on plata anyway, it's not the way to cook. What does that mean? The plata is a very slow cooking utensil. It doesn't cook very fast. I'm not talking about those hot plates that people cook with them on weekdays. That's like a stove, electric stove. I'm not talking about that. The plata is not really a cooking utensil. It's very, very slow. It's not so strong. So it's not really the way to cook on that. It's not very practical to cook. So therefore, says the Rabbi, Shalom, Maran Ravadiya, he says that according to Rashba, who says that if it's not the way to cook in this manner, so then you're allowed to put it there, and there's no issue of mixzikin bashel, that it looks like you're cooking. So according to that, a person could return it even from the fridge directly onto the plata, and you wouldn't have to put some kind of intermediary there. So if you want to rely on this opinion, you definitely can, whether you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi, because according to Rashba, the truth is, right, that there is a svara, there is a nice rational deduction there, a rational theory that since the plata is not really a cooking utensil, most people don't use it for cooking, so therefore it doesn't really look like you're cooking when you're putting it on the plata. So therefore a person can put it directly on the plata if he wants to. If he wants to be machmir, if he wants to be stringent, let him put something in between. Not necessary, but some people have the custom to do it this way. Whatever. So the point is that now I'm putting it back on the plata, either way. So if it's dry, as we said, there's no issue. Why? Because it's already fully cooked. And it also doesn't look like you're cooking because of the reason we just mentioned. So therefore it's allowed. What about if there's something which has a broth, something like a soup? So the soup is, the majority over there is liquid. So if that's the case, is it allowed to return it back to the plata? So according to the simple understanding, it's not allowed. Why is that? Because yesh bishul acher bishul belach. According to the shita of the Rashi and the Rosh and many other Rishonim, even though something which is liquid was already cooked, if it gets cooked again, it's considered to be like you're cooking on Shabbat. Why is that? Because liquids don't really have like a definitive thing of cooking. You can cook it once, and then you'll cook it again, and it boils up again it gets boiled again from the beginning. So it looks like you're cooking again, whatever, or you are cooking again. So therefore, according to the Shita of Rashi, according to the opinion of Rashi and the Rosh and the other Rishonim, it's considered to be like you're cooking. And this is the way the Shulchan Aruch decides in the Halacha. Even though the Ramah, the Rabbi of the Ashkenazim, goes not like this opinion, he goes like the opinion of the Rambam, which argues with this. According to Rambam, and bishul acharei bishul balach, there is no cooking after cooking when it comes to something which is moist. So therefore, according to the Rambam, it would be allowed to put the soup back, because once it was cooked already, fully cooked, there is no cooking after cooking. But according to the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, the Sfaradim go like, so according to that opinion, according to Rashi and the Rosh and many others, what happens is that there is bishul acharei bishul, there is cooking after cooking when it comes to something which is moist. So therefore, a person cannot return from the fridge the soup, which is majority is liquid, to heat it up, because you're cooking again, and the cooking would be making you violating the laws of Shabbat by cooking again. So therefore, what's the solution? How do we find a solution for this problem? So actually, there's different ways to remedy this issue. As we said, that just to put the soup back is prohibited according to what we just said, but there's a solution. What's the solution? The solution is, number one, first of all, a person could put the plata with a timer. What does that mean? The timer will turn off the plata when it's not being used. So then what happens is that if that's the case, a person could put the soup onto the plata when the timer has the plata off, and then it'll turn on later after that, and this will be okay. Why would that be okay to do it this way? Because it says in the Gemara, Masechet Shabbat, Kuf Chav, right? Melacha he the asura v'grama shareh. What does that mean? That it's indirect causation. According to Gemara, according to Talmud, indirect causation is allowed. What does that mean, direct causation? That when I put the pot on the plata, at that time it was not on. So I didn't really cook it, and then later on it came on by itself. So therefore it's indirect causation, grama. So according to that, a person could do it this way. If it was something which is fully cooked, as we said, you can return it back onto the plata when the plata is off, because the timer has it off, and then it'll turn it on automatically by itself, and this way you could heat it up in a manner like this. Let's say a person doesn't have a timer, so then what's other solution is there besides that? The truth is that there's also an interesting idea, which is that that which we mentioned already, that something which is broth, liquid like a soup, it's forbidden to put it back onto the plata on Shabbat. When does this apply? That's mitztamik veyafelo. What does that mean? That means that when it gets dried out by the heat, as it goes on, what happens is that it's good for that. It becomes more tasty, it becomes more delicious, whatever. The fact that it gets dried out and congealed like that makes it better, improves it. But if it's something which actually mitztamik veralo, it's something which it's bad for it to get congealed and to get dried out, as the heat makes it more dry. So there it's allowed to put it back onto the plata. What's the reason why? It was already cooked one time, but now I'm cooking it again, perhaps, right? But the fact that it's bad for it, the fact that it's congealing more and more and evaporating, more water is evaporating from there, that's allowed according to the Puskim. According to Shulchan Aruch, mitztamik veralo is allowed. So therefore, in a case like that, it will be allowed. What will be a practical case of this? Let's say, for instance, I had some boiled water. I boiled up some water to make some tea, whatever it is, and the water was already boiled before Shabbat. So now I could put it back onto the plata and heat up that water. Why is that? Because since it was already boiled one time, right? And even though I'm going to now heat it up again and make it very, very hot, nevertheless, mitztamik veralo, it's bad for it now to be heated up and congealed and to be evaporated. Why is that? Because we're losing the amount of water that you had before. So it's bad. It's not good for it. The fact that it's evaporating more and more. The water is getting lost. So therefore we say mitztamik veralo. So in a case like that, it will be allowed to put it back onto the plata if it was cooked one time. Same thing would also apply with coffee. Let's say a person has a coffee, let's say, that you already made before, Erev Shabbat. So there also, the fact that it's going to evaporate, it's going to make the coffee worse. The quality is going to decrease. It's going to go down. So therefore, also, if a person has a coffee, let's say he wants to heat it up on a plata, he would be allowed to heat it up on a plata, even though he had it in the fridge. Why is that? because once it was cooked already one time, mistamek viralo, it's considered to be bad that it's congealing and it's evaporating. So therefore it will be allowed to do it this way, to put it back. But something which is good for it to congeal, let's say like a soup for instance, that the more that it evaporates, it becomes more tasty, becomes more praiseworthy. So there it would not be allowed. So depending on what you have, you may be allowed to put it back on or not. Then this is the reason also, one of the reasons why Maran, or Danielov, our great rabbi, he says that when it comes to something which the minority is liquid and the majority is solid, let's say like some kind of a stew, there is broth there, or some kind of a fish dish, or whatever it is, there is broth, but the majority is solid. So there, the rabbi says you're allowed to put it back onto the plata. And what's the reason why? Even though you had it in the fridge, as we mentioned, the reason is because the more dry it gets, in a case like that, where the minority is liquid, the worse it gets. It becomes more dried out, and the taste gets worse, it decreases. So the mistamek viralo. So therefore, the fact that it's congealing, and the fact that it's getting dried out and it's evaporating, is making the dish more dry, and therefore it's less delicious. So therefore, in a case like that, if it's bad for it to get dried out, so then it will be allowed to put it back onto the plata if it was already 100% cooked, as we said, before Shabbat. That's the idea. So in a case like this, it will be allowed to put it back on, in the cases we just mentioned. There are also other cases, you can imagine what they are. But the interesting thing is like this now. Let's say, for instance, we have something which we're not really sure if it's really bad for that dish. There's what to say in one way, maybe it's bad, maybe it's not bad. Some people consider it to be bad to be dried out. Some people consider it to be something which is praiseworthy, something which is delicious. Everybody has different tastes when it comes to these things. Some people like to dry things out, some people like to eat it more moist. So in a case where we're not sure if drying it out improves the taste of that dish, are we allowed to put it back onto the plata? Safek, it's a doubt. So there, says Moreno Rabbeinu in his book Chazon Ovadia, Chelik Aleph, page Pei Hey. He says over there something interesting, that here we have a sfeka, we have a double doubt here, and therefore it's allowed to put it back onto the plata as well. What does that mean? In a case where it's a doubt whether this thing is being approved or not, some people would say it's bad, it's getting quality is going down. Some people would say maybe it's not going down, it's going up. So if I'm not 100% sure, 50-50. So the rabbi says you're allowed to put it back on. Why is that? Because we have two doubts. One doubt, as we said, is maybe the halacha is like the Rambam, that en bishula acharei bishul belach, that there is no cooking after cooking when it comes to something which is moist. So therefore, according to that opinion, as we already said, it will be allowed to put it back on. This is why some Ashkenazim actually could be lenient regarding this, even though many are not. They do like the Shulchan Aruch, like the Sfaradim, but many Ashkenazim, because the Ramah says like the Rambam, he decides like the Rambam. So if that's the case, according to Rambam, there's no issue of heating up something once it was cooked before. There's no issue, even if it's totally moist, if it's totally liquid. But the question is, according to the other opinion, according to Rashi and according to the Rosh, which they say yesh bishul acharei bishul balach, there is cooking after cooking when it comes to something which is moist. So here also, what happens is that we're not sure, okay, which is the halacha. Maybe halacha is like the Rambam, maybe halacha is like the Rashi. So therefore, what we say is it's one doubt over here. We're not sure which way the halacha goes. It's machloket also. It's a dispute between the Maran, Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramah as well as we mentioned. So therefore, there's one doubt. The other doubt is that maybe this thing, the fact that it gets congealed and evaporated is bad for it. We're not really sure. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. Some people consider it to be good. Some people consider it to be bad, depending on your taste. So therefore, it's like 50-50. So there's the second doubt. So we have two doubts, double doubt. So therefore, says the Rabbi Washalman, in a case like that, where there's a double doubt, in this case, where there's a doubt regarding whether it's improved or not, so there, what we can do is we can put it back onto the plata, even though the plata is already turned on. We don't have to wait till it turns off, as we said. That's a different solution. So here also, a person can use this kind of solution when he needs to put something back onto the plata, where it's not really so clear whether it's good for that or it's not. It's bad for it. But if it's bad, for sure, everybody knows that it's bad. The more it gets dried out, the worse it becomes, the food. So there, for sure, it's allowed to put it back onto the plata, even though it's there's a liquid there. It doesn't make any difference, even though its majority is liquid. If it's getting bad by being put back on the plata, for sure it's allowed. What will be an exception to that rule? The exception would be that, it's really considered to be something which is good for that, to get dried out for this dish. But, one person has like a different opinion than the whole world. So there, we wouldn't go according to one person's opinion against everybody. That's not really considered to be a doubt. That's considered to be more like you have your own personal taste, and it goes against the whole world. So there, we wouldn't rely on that because we have to go according to things which are accepted in the world. There are some who say like that, some who say like this, but something which is particularly only for you, and the whole world doesn't agree with you, so there you shouldn't rely on that. That's not really called a doubt. It's just something which you have a quirk, certain quirk in your head, which is personal to you. That's something else. That's a different issue. There you cannot rely on that. So there the solution will be only to put it back on. If it's something which is mostly liquid, the only solution would be to put it back on when the plata is not lit because you have a timer, as we mentioned about that. This will be the solution. So this is the way we can work around this problem. Also, another issue which involves the Parsha Shavua. We're reading this week's Parsha is Acharei Mot Kedoshim. So over there, one of the prohibitions that the Torah mentions about being holy, the Jewish being holy, is regarding the issue of homosexual relations. So as you know, or you may not know, that the Judaism is very, very against this, and it says in the Torah that a person who performs homosexual relations, that means an actual sexual act between a man and a man, that's what we're talking about. So he's liable to death. If there was witnesses and there was a bet din, there would be a high court that could punish him. Today we don't have that, but they would be liable to death. So today, since we don't have it, at least he would be chayav karet. He would be cut off from the Jewish people by performing homosexual relations. That's very, very clear, right? And what's the reason why the Torah states, right, that it's such a severe prohibition? This prohibition, because it calls it a to'eva, something which is an abomination. A man and a man together, it's called something abominable in the eyes of the Torah, in the eyes of God. It's abominable. So the question is now, today we have a different issue which resembles this, and we have to understand how that relates to this prohibition. The question is, what about a person who's a transgender, a person who is taking hormones? He's a man, but he's taking hormones, female hormones, or also, let's say he also changes. He had his male organ cut off, and he made it into a female organ. They do these surgeries today. You know how it is today. They do all these things. So the question is, now if a person became a transgender, let's say he was a man, and now he wants to become a woman. He already did, let's say, or he went halfway or the whole way. He took some, let's say he took some hormones, or he had some surgery done to put all kinds of things on his body to make him look like a female. Or let's say he went all the way and he cut off his organ altogether, and he made himself into a female, even in the genital area. So the question is now, once a person does that, it's forbidden to do that, by the way. A person who cuts off his male organ is considered to be a very, very big sin. Sirus is one of the big prohibitions of the Torah, that a person is not allowed to castrate himself like this, and therefore a person certainly cannot do that. But let's say he already did it, too late now. The question is, what do we call this person, right? Once he already became a transgender or a transsexual, what do we call him? We call him a man or a woman? That's the question, right? So the answers are, according to the vast majority of the poskim, the authorities, what they say is, as in addition to the issue that it's forbidden to do this, to castrate yourself like this, and also to wear the clothing of a woman, since the Torah forbids this as well, that the man should not wear the clothing of a woman, and a woman should not wear the clothing of a man. It's a different issue also, which is a prohibition there. But now the question is, does he become a woman because he turned himself into, became a transgender? So the answer is, according to the vast majority of the poskim, they say that a person doesn't become a woman by changing his sex like this. He still remains the same sex that he was before, the same gender. So that's very corroborated, by the way, in the words of the Talmud. If you know a little bit about the discussion of the Talmud regarding the issue of the Hermaphrodite, right, which is called, which has a special name in the Torah. It's called androgyn, right? Androgynos. So this gender, which is a person which has both female and male organs, he has both of them. So there, the truth is that we say it's a doubt whether this person is a man or a woman, because he has both organs, that of a male and that of a female. So the truth is that we learn from that sugya, from that topic matter, that it all depends on how do we determine the gender of a person, depending on what organs does he have when he's born. When he's born, we see, does he have male organs or female organs? If he has male organs, he's a man. If he has female organs, he's a female. and nothing can change that afterwards. There's no way to change your designation of gender by doing some kind of operation, even though this operation was forbidden to do. But nevertheless, if you did it, it's not going to change your gender. So therefore, you can to be a person who cuts off his member, his organ, is considered to be a castrated male, not a female. So therefore, he never becomes a female. And therefore, what happens is this pathetic person who did this, we have to feel sorry for him. You know why? Because now he's really stuck in between a rock and a hard place. What does that mean? On the one hand, he can't really marry anybody. He can't marry a man because he's a man. So he cannot say, oh, I'm a woman, I'll marry a man. So he cannot go with a man. He has no permission to be with any man because it's considered to be homosexual relations, because he's still a man. Number two, he also cannot marry a woman either. Even though he's a man, he cannot marry a woman. Why is that? Because he cut off his member, he cut off his male organ, so therefore it's considered to be kuchofcha. What does that mean? A person who's castrated. Some person who's castrated like that, who has his member cut off, he cannot marry. He's not allowed to marry a woman either. A Jewish woman who was born Jewish. So therefore, he's in a very difficult situation. A person like this. So we see from there how a person has to be careful not to bring himself into the situation like this, where he's gonna get into a place where he can't go this way, can't go that way. He's gonna be stuck with some kind of a designation like this. Can't marry a man, can't marry a woman, can't do anything. He's stuck. So therefore, Rabbi, a person has to be very careful not to fall into this trap that he may think, I feel, I was born a man, but I feel like a woman. I was born a woman, I feel like a man. Doesn't matter what you feel like, whatever. You have to talk about that with your psychologist. You have to go discuss this with rabbis, but don't change your gender and think that because you go and cut this and you cut off this and you cut off that, you're going to become a different sex, a different gender. It's not going to change your gender to do all these operations and all these hormones, all these things. You still remain what you were before. So therefore, Rabbi, if a person, as we said, it's already too late and he already did this, he's gonna have a big problem. Can't marry this, can't marry that. Also, the question is, what about the other way around, right? The female who wants to become a male. Here also, there's a prohibition for the female to destroy her organs, the reproductive organs. There's also a prohibition regarding that in the Talmud. So therefore, a woman also who wants to become a male has the same issue here as well. What does that mean? That now she's not going to be able to marry a woman, even though she looks like a man. She can't marry a woman because she's a woman. She was born a woman. That's the way she remains all her life. There's no way to change your gender like that by altering mutilating your private parts. There's no issue of changing your gender like that. So therefore, Rabbi, the issue is that a person may think that, I became a female, so I can now go on with men. But the truth is, no, you're still having homosexual relations. So therefore, a person is liable to be cut off the Jewish people by having relations like this with men. Even though he thinks he's a woman, he's still a man, no matter what he did. No matter what he did, the surgery or did hormones, all kinds of things like this, doesn't make any difference. He's still considered to be a man. So therefore, Rabbi, we have to stay away from this. Like the Parsha tells us, Kedoshim to you, right? We have to be holy people. The holy people, the chosen people, the Jewish people have to be special. What does that mean? To stay away from all these crazy things, all kinds of new things that come to the world. We have to stay in a holy mode to counteract all the crazy things that go on around us. So what does that mean, Rabbi? That a person should have a marriage based on the holiness and sanctity, and the main point of the marriage has to be to have children. So once a person cuts off his member and cuts off his genitals and this and that, how's he going to have children? How's he going to reproduce? The pruvu, the most important, to be fruitful and multiply, the most important mitzvah is going to be bypassed. So therefore, Rabbi, if a person does that, he's getting himself into a very difficult situation, and he's going to have a very difficult time for the rest of his life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should save us and help us that we should fulfill this obligation, as it says in the Parsha Shavua, we should be a holy nation unto the world and not get into these impure and unusual things, and just to stay away from that and to conduct everything the straight way, the proper way, the way of holiness, the way of light, not the way of darkness. Amen ve'amen. We should be all healthy and happy. Have a great Shabbat, and we should get back with Hashem to our communities and to our studies together in groups, and the prayers in groups. The politicians who are trying to stop us from doing that, to do group prayers. They're very, very foolish because they're preventing the blessing from coming to the community. This is a very big mistake. They're going to pay for it. We're all going to pay for it. So we have to try to get back to our communities as soon as possible. We can do social distancing. We can stay a little bit apart, 6 feet, whatever it is. No problem. Okay, we can do that. We can do it in a way which complies with these rules. But nevertheless, we have to get back to prayers. We have to get back to our groups. We have to get back to, because this is what brings the divine presence, the Shekhinah, the holy presence of God in the Jewish people, that we're getting together and praying and studying Torah in a group. Amen, amen. Shabbat shalom, kol tuv.